Good afternoon. Thank you so much for indulging us on the time delay. We appreciate it very much. I want to be respectful of your time, but we do appreciate that indulgence. I'm so glad that you all took time out of your schedules to come and be here to hear about the exciting information being presented on the Nurse Licensure Compact. Before we get going this afternoon, I want to introduce to you Lisa Durden. She's the Division Director at the Professional Licensing Boards Division of the Office of Secretary of State. She's my boss, and she wants to present a little information about RN renewals, I believe.
Good afternoon. I just thank you for coming today. I know this is an important presentation that you're all here to see and hear about, and we heard it earlier today, and we're interested to hear all the things that were talked about this morning. I just wanted to mention that it is time for the RNs who have an expiration date of January 31st, 2017. It's time to renew your licenses. We've sent several notices so far and hope you've gotten those, but just make sure you get that done. Renew early, and tell all of your friends to renew early so that if anyone does have a problem, you have plenty of time to get that problem resolved before the expiration date. Remember to about CE, completing your CE and uploading those documents to CE Broker. And that's going to be for the RNs with the expiration date of January 31st, 2017, and for the upcoming LPN renewals. LPNs are going to have to do that as well. There's information on the board's website about CE Broker and how to upload your documents and what steps are involved in that process. So just make sure you look at the website if you don't know what to do or what you're supposed to do, and for further information. But again, the LPNs will expire March 31st of 2017. We'll be getting those renewals open soon, and we'll send notices when we get those live and ready. And that's all that I had today. Thank you.
So I failed to introduce myself. My name is Jim Cleghorn. I'm the Executive Director for the board. Again, welcome to this afternoon's session. We appreciate you attending. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Marcus Downs. Marcus is the CEO of the Georgia Nurses Association. GNA is taking the legislative lead on this important initiative, and Marcus has got a few remarks for us this afternoon.
So good afternoon. I am Marcus Downs, Executive Director for the Georgia Nurses Association. I want to thank Jim Cleghorn and the Board of Nursing for allowing us to visit with you today. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave a little bit earlier, but I'm leaving in the hands of our able lobbyists, Wendy Clifton and Ted Bordeaux. They'll be presenting on some of the issues that we'll be looking at in the 2017 legislative session. I had the pleasure to visit with Dr. Alexander earlier this morning, where she shared the background behind the Nursing Compact, the intent of the Compact, some of the changes that are going to need to be implemented once the Compact successfully passes in Georgia. And we're going to be in partnership with this national board to assist in getting this passed. So I want to share that with you and our interest and our full commitment to working on the Compact here in Georgia. But I also want to thank many of you who attended the GNA pre-legislative session workshop a couple of weeks ago. I want to update you on that and let you know we had a full house. We can house 50 people comfortably in the GNA Education Center. We had roughly 60. That was really exciting. It was the first time that GNA had entertained such a meeting. So that was really good. We were able to have nursing professionals who presented information to nurses. I'm not a nurse by admission, but I do know a lot of you, and I think I'm smart enough to know there are certain answers that I cannot provide without a nurse offering that insight. So I want to let anyone who has any question know that, I'll never present anything on my own. It will always be the voice of a nurse that I have heard. Some of the other pieces on our legislative priority list are to work for the tax incentive program for nurse practitioners and physician assistants. I think that the state has found itself in a fiscally strong position this year, and that is something that we can work for and work toward as the physicians earn this ability 2 to 3 years ago. In addition to that, many states have a peer assistance program that is funded through their state. Georgia is one, I think maybe the only one, that does not receive state assistance. And it is our goal to have conversations with the appropriation chairs and the budget writers on having that being something that's implemented in Georgia. And I think the last thing that I think is really important to all of Georgia and patient-centered care is making sure that advanced practice nurses have the authority to provide the type of care that they've been trained to provide and work into their full scope of practice. And that is super important. You got to be really sophisticated in how you pursue that type of legislation. Because for the past 6 years, what has been done is we've been going saying, hey, give us this, hey, give us that. And we've not provided the particular rationale outside of a couple of talking points as to why it was important. But what needs to happen is we need to go to rural Georgia. We need to go to Little Wissy, Georgia. We need to go to Bainbridge. And we need to be able to show that there's a lack of healthcare professionals in those districts. And the APRNs are the ones who are trained, who will be able to provide that support as well. So I say all that to say GNA is in the process of tearing down its silo. A lot of people don't like to hear me talk about this, but the truth is the truth. But we have a silo that we have to tear down, and we've got to build some bridges between GNA, between APRN, between GNLC, between every other specialty organization that exists in Georgia. And I'm committed to doing that. I think we've got a good team that's committed to doing that. And if y'all will trust us, we'll do everything to make sure that people understand how important your specialty organization is to the state and how important the state named organization is. So I'm always directly accessible. You can email me, contact me. Ms. Eisler, she knows that well. Brenda Rowe knows that well. There are several other people who I hear from all the time, but don't hold anything. If you got a question, ask it, and I'll give you an honest answer, I promise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. It has been refreshing to have the personal relationship with Marcus as the CEO at GNA. He and I have gotten to be friends and have been able to encourage one another. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to work collaboratively with him. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Marianne Alexander. Dr. Alexander is the Chief Nursing Officer for Regulation at the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. Nearly 7 years ago, when I started as the executive director of the Georgia Board of Nursing and started interacting with National Council, she was one of the first individuals that I met and has always served as a great encourager and leader in kind of guiding us and helping us through the steps to become a better board. So at this point, Marianne, come and share with us about the Nurse Licensure Compact.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here today. Can you hear me? Great. I tend to move around a lot, and so this clip-on mic works better for me. Well, first thing I want to do is tell you about the organization that I represent, the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. We are a non-for-profit organization that consists of boards of nursing. 59 of them includes the 50 states. 3 states have separate RN and LPN boards. Nebraska has a separate APRN board, and there are 4 U.S. territories. We also have 22 associate members from around the world. Our job is to support the boards of nursing in their role of public protection. One of the big aspects of my job is to oversee our research department, and a lot of the work that we do focuses on building research, collecting data in order to have evidence-based policy. And then we provide a lot of resources and education, not only for boards of nursing, but for nurses in general. So I encourage you to come to our website sometime and see all that we have. One of our primary initiatives that we are dedicated to is the Nurse Licensure Compact. And we are providing all the resources and help we can to states to help them become part of the compact. And I'm going to tell you today why our organization is doing that. So I want to begin with telling you a little bit about the current environment of healthcare and where we are moving. And this is probably not going to be any news to you at all, But things are rapidly changing in the type of delivery systems that we're employing to reach people in all parts of the country. This is a picture of a hospital in Missouri. It's called Mercy Virtual. Many of you have probably heard of it. It has all the departments in a regular hospital that you would see in anywhere you go across the country. The only thing it doesn't have inside are patients. The patients are scattered along a 5-state area, and all those patients receive care virtually from the doctors, nurses, and staff at this hospital. And this is just an indicator of what is to come. Let me also talk about schools and how much that has changed in the past few years. So a student now in California can graduate from Yale and never leave their house through an online program. And in fact, online programs are becoming so customary that students, no matter where you go and what you do, usually have an online program. And things are moving much more rapidly than we ever anticipated, even 10 years ago. So we have rapid changes in healthcare delivery models. We have changing models of delivering education. And Georgia, along with the majority of other states, have a 100-year-old single state licensure model that served you all and all of us very well for over a century. But will it take you into the future? And that's what this presentation is all about. It's about the future of healthcare and nursing education in Georgia. So I'm going to tell you about some nurses. So this is a nurse that is licensed in Georgia, and she works for a practice that provides mental health services, and she does a tremendous service to patients in 3 states, Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia. She provides telephonic mental health services. The person on the screen there is a faculty member in Illinois, and he provides remote clinical instruction. He teaches right here he's teaching how to do a neurologic exam via Skype. He's located in Illinois. The nurse and the patient are in Ohio. This is a nurse in Tennessee monitoring the cardiac status of her patients in 5 states. One of them is Georgia. This nurse is licensed in Georgia, and she's talking to a patient in Wisconsin. He lives in Georgia during the winter months, but she's talking to him in his home in Wisconsin because it's July, and she's calling him with his lab values for some his INR, and she's going to be altering his Coumadin dose based on those results. And finally, picture of this, a common picture, faculty teaching in an online program. She's licensed in Georgia, and she's teaching students in 10 different states. So tell me, some of you know the answer, you're not allowed to respond, but what do all these nurses, now we know one thing they all have in common. They're practicing remotely, via some digitally or telephonically, but what else do they have, you think they might have in common? As a matter of fact, they're practicing without a license in all those states. They have one license, and they're unaware of the fact that they need licenses in all of those states to practice. But more so, there are nurses who do know that they need licenses. And there are nurses that have multiple licenses paying a lot of money annually or biannually whenever they have to renew those licenses. And often they're in different states are in different time sequences. Some nurses tell me, I feel like I'm constantly renewing a license. Employers are paying a lot of money to have their nurses have multiple licenses. And in addition to that, insurance companies. We were talking to people at United Healthcare, and they were saying, you know, we spend over $3 million a year on licensure fees, criminal background checks, and all the things we have to do for licenses. In fact, we have 13 staff that do nothing but nursing licensing. So now, many people may say, well, you know what? I'm not worried about the insurance companies. They make plenty of money. But those costs, the cost to insurance companies, the cost to employers, all are rolled down to all of us. So practice is where the patient is. So what we feel that the Nurse Licensure Compact is it's a modern licensure solution for the 21st century. So first thing I'm going to tell you about what a compact is. And it's nothing more than an agreement among 2 or more states that is created to address a particular problem that is common across state boundaries. It's basically a contract between 2 or more states. Every state is a member of at least 25 different compacts. One of them is called the Juvenile Offender Compact, and it relates to transporting juvenile offenders across state boundaries. The most notable one that affects all of us is the Driver's License Compact. And I don't always like to compare a driver's license with a nursing license because it's notably different. But what is the same is one license. You get one driver's license. You're able to cross and drive in whatever other state you want with that license, but you have to abide by the rules of the road of the state in which you are driving in. So at least you think that this compact concept is something new. It goes way back. Many years. The first one to probably reach our country was the Mayflower Compact. And they drew this up because they didn't want to have a mutiny when the Pilgrims arrived on shore here. That was drawn up on the Mayflower. The most famous is the United States Constitution. And that was, again, it was drawn up as an agreement among the states. So what is the Nurse Licensure Compact? It allows a nurse to have one, what we call multi-state license that you receive in your primary state of residency, and it allows the nurse to practice in other states that are part of the compact, both physically and electronically, and without having to get another license. So, some primary basic concepts. The nurse is issued a multi-state license in her declared state of residency, known as her home state. She holds only one multi-state license issued by that state, but she has a privilege to practice in other compact states, or what we call remote or party states. If a state is not a member of the compact, then you need to get a single state license in those states if you want to practice it. But certainly, it relieves a tremendous burden on a lot of nurses and employers, and our goal is that every state will be a part of the compact so that every nurse will only need one multi-state license. And the only exception to that might be the District of Columbia. So one important thing is, regardless of the license, the nurse must abide by the Nurse Practice Act and regulations of the state he or she is practicing in. So if a nurse comes from Florida, from Louisiana, that nurse must abide by the Georgia Nurse Practice Act regulations and standards. And, you know, some people say, oh, well, how would anybody know all those practice acts? Well, this is the same standard, the same requirement now, only now the nurse gets an individual license in all those states. Whereas with this, you don't need the process, but the requirement of knowing the regulations of where you're practicing is the same. And as I often say to people, it's not unlike working in different institutions. You have to abide by their policies and procedures. So what we say is it is a state-based license that is nationally recognized and locally enforced. So this is a little bit of an outdated map, but this is of the states that are in the current compact right now. And the only thing that's out of date on this map is, I'm going to fill this in for you. So you're going to see how the map is going to begin to look like. Florida should be in blue because they just passed the new enhanced nurse licensure compact that I'm going to be talking to you about. So Georgia is virtually going to be surrounded, with the exception of Alabama, by compact states. And in fact, the Southeast will almost be entirely compact states. So it is really advantageous for Georgia to pass this legislation. I'm going to give you a little bit of the history. People were very forward-thinking nurses in 1997. And this model is what we call mutual recognition, because states mutually recognize the license. And they came together, we call a delegate assembly, but basically it's representatives from all the state boards came together, and they foresaw the issues that we're talking about today and said, we need to address some of the things that are coming down the pike and prepare for the future. And in 1999, the first state passed compact legislation. And from the year 2000 to 2015, 25 states enacted it. And it seems pretty good, but it took a long time for 25 states to join. And then it seemed like there was just kind of a plateau. And around the year 2013, we started to look at this issue a little bit closer. So one of the things that we became very interested in was the fact that telehealth services were growing in leaps and bounds, and big companies such as Verizon were now going to the state and national legislature and going to Congress and saying, we have services that can now bring telehealth and bring healthcare to regions of this country like never before, that can provide these health services, but employers can't do this because they can't afford the licensure for the doctors and nurses. And so what we started to see was that Congress was going to come up with a solution for this. And there were a lot of discussions about national licensure. In fact, there were bills being proposed in Congress that they were going to take over licensing of healthcare providers. And as I always say, you could only imagine what it would be like if you got your license from the federal government. Try calling Washington, D.C. if you have a question or a problem, or your license didn't come in the mail, and imagine the renewals when it took place for the whole country. And we really felt as though the state-based licensure system model is working, but we have to be able to address this and work on this ourselves without letting the federal government step in. At the same time, other healthcare professions were having the same issues and talking about the compact. They never had been a part of a compact before, but they were certainly seeing this as a solution. So, putting it all together, back at just about 2 years ago, this is what the environment looked like. We were hearing about the economic burden of nurses having multiple licenses. We were also starting to hear that companies had hiring preferences for nurses in NLC states. Military spouses were starting to become more vocal, saying we are moving. Sometimes we just have to relocate for training, various reasons. We're not there permanently, and we have to get a license. Patients were now traveling much more for their health care. So a lot of times now, as you can imagine, just for an example, Emory University, the number of patients that go there, have surgery, have a procedure, and then go back home to another state. Nurses need to be able to call and follow up on those patients. Online programs growing in leaps and bounds, and faculty were needed multiple licenses or they weren't able to do the online program. There is a program in the tri-state area of Illinois that Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa, those faculty all need 3 licenses because those students do clinicals in all of those states. We know there are issues related to disaster relief and mobilizing nurses to non-compact states, and there are just rising costs of healthcare due to this licensure issue. So we felt as though we needed to address it. And so in 2013, for about a year, we convened our members in a series of meetings to say, how do we solve this problem? So the first thing we did was we looked at the solution that we had. And we said, well, let's look first at the Nurse Licensure Compact. And we said, well, first thing we know is it protects the public. And that's what boards of nursing want to know the most. Is it safe? And we had 15 years of data that said it's safe. There was no rise in discipline from nurses that had compact licenses, no unusual incidences, nothing. We know it allows for state sovereignty. It's administratively feasible for states, but we knew this. It needed updating. And the states that were not joining, that were saying we refuse to join, it was because they wanted uniform licensure requirements. In other words, they wanted all states to require the same requirements for licensure. So we heard them. And from 2014 to 2015, we redrafted the compact, incorporating the new uniform licensure requirements that every state that's going to be part of the compact has to adopt. And in March 2015, they were completed, and in May, they were adopted. So let me tell you about the uniform licensure requirements that are now required for a multi-state license in a compact state, or will be. This new compact has not gone into effect yet. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But you know, one of the things that with this compact that's different from the old compact said minimal requirements. Whatever the state requires, no matter how minimal, that's fine. Now we've upped the game and we said high standards for a multi-state license. And they're really not anything unusual compared to what most states require, but for those that weren't, they have to come up to par. So number one, a nurse has to meet the home state's qualifications. So whatever you require needs to be met. They have to graduate from an approved nursing education program. If they are an international student, they have to present a credentials review that shows that they have had an equivalent education as a nurse from the US. And they have to be proficient and pass a test in 4 different areas of the English language. They have to pass the NCLEX, RN or PN, or the predecessor, which was the State Board Test Pool. They cannot have any active discipline on their license. They need a criminal background check, and they cannot have any prior state or felony conviction. Now, let me just clarify that if a nurse has a felony on her record, it doesn't mean she can't get a license, but she gets a single state license. And thereby, every state is able to determine whether they want that nurse and look at the felony, what happened, look at all the extenuating circumstances, and determine if she should be licensed. The individual cannot be currently enrolled in an alternative or monitoring program, and they need a valid U.S. Social Security number. So for the nurses that meet those qualifications, and I can tell you that it will be the vast majority of nurses in the United States. These are the benefits. They will be able to legally practice across the state border with one license. It will reduce cost and the administrative burden of maintaining multiple licenses. These are this is a small number, just an example of the many nurses that will be affected if Georgia becomes part of the compact. So, camp nurses, I used to be the executive officer of the Board of Nursing in Illinois, which is not a compact state. And I would get calls every spring from nurses who would say, I'm just going to be the camp nurse for 1 week. Do I really need a license in your state? And the answer was yes. So, home health nurses, especially living on a border, and especially now with telephonic home health services, case management nurses, they've been some of the biggest advocates, transport nurses, and of course, nurses that live on state borders, just to name a few, and of course, those who practice via telephone. So for telehealth, I think the advantages speak for themselves. And it goes beyond telephonic. Virtual ICUs are popping up all over the place. We now do remote monitoring of patients. There are call centers that are national call centers that handle states across the country. There are telehealth nursing and clinics that provide care to health professional shortage areas. And of course, there are the nurses that work at the insurance companies. Faculty, I can't say enough about the benefits to faculty, whether it's supervising clinical experiences across the state border or teaching didactic and online programs. Benefits to Georgia. First of all, it encourages nurses to come and work in your state. So I always talk about the millennials are the largest generation in history. Their numbers exceed the baby boomers. They haven't all entered the workforce yet. We certainly want them in nursing. And one of the things we know about the millennials is they want to be mobile. And it's amazing when we go to the National Student Nurses Association, how many students actually know about the compact and want to know which states, because when they're looking to decide where they want to work, they want a place where they can be mobile. And winter residents, one of the big advantages why Florida wanted to join, because they wanted nurses that live up north in the summer to come and work down in Florida in the winter months. And certainly that would also apply to Georgia. It provides for economic growth and prosperity, that both employers and nurses have more money to spend if they're not spending it on licensure. It attracts healthcare industry and employers to states, and we're certain that this would be the case for Georgia. And it will decrease the red tape during disasters. I know there was a lot of issues during Hurricane Matthew that had to be addressed, and this would solve that. It will encourage efficiency at the Board of Nursing. Instead of doing a lot of licensure verifications, they can use their resources in other ways. It offers relief for military families coming to Georgia. There will be more ability to share and gain investigative information for serious complaints. That would be the Board of Nursing, but you would certainly be able to have that, which right now states cannot share any investigative information if a nurse has a complaint against her, even if it's somebody quite serious, such as a sex offender. And it basically will demonstrate to the nurses in Georgia that the legislators, the governor, recognizes them, supports them, and are progressive thinkers. So, I was looking around on websites related to Georgia to learn more about your state and the issues and what you had going on. And, I didn't know this about you, but I found this on an Emory website. It said, did you know Atlanta is the nation's health IT capital? there are more than 225 health IT companies in Georgia, and that number continues to rise rapidly. So this is a map of Georgia and all the health IT companies that are in it. You want to stay and be the capital of technology and healthcare of the country, and you don't want some of these businesses leaving and going to especially your neighboring states that are part of the compact. Florida just passed the new compact, as I mentioned. They would like you to be in it because certainly there can be an exchange of nurses across that border, which would help both states, but also they will benefit if you do not join, because a lot of those nurses from the north that may come south for the winter time may choose to go to Florida because they have a compact license and won't need a second license in order to get a job there for the winter months. This really doesn't pertain to you, but it is part of the compact. So nurses that are in the existing nurse licensure compact that hold a multi-state license will be grandfathered into the new, what we're calling the enhanced compact. So when does the enhanced compact become effective? Now, states last year, 10 states passed the enhanced compact legislation. This year we have at least 18 states more that will be doing that, but it will become effective when a total of 26 states pass the legislation, or if 26 states don't, which we don't think that will happen, then it would be December 31st, 2018. But I can tell you, it took 15 years for 25 states to join the old compact. In 1 year alone, the new compact had 10 states join last year. And we have 18 states at least that will be introducing legislation this year. So that effective date means the date the compact is officially formed. I'll tell you about the Interstate Commission in a minute, but they will be responsible for writing the rules which are needed before it can be implemented. And then Georgia can actually set the date for when they're going to begin issuing licenses. Some people are interested in what happens if a complaint is filed against a nurse from another state while she's working on a compact license in Georgia, and the investigation would take place in Georgia. The information gathered during the investigation would be shared with the home state, and Georgia can take action on that nurse's privilege to practice. So if it's a serious, egregious violation, Georgia does not have to wait for the home state to take action on the license. They can just you can take action yourself on the privilege to practice and say the nurse's privilege is revoked in Georgia. We have a national database, which I hope all employers are aware of. It's called nurses.com, and all licensure and disciplinary information from all nurses from across the country are entered into Nurses. They're that way now. It is, of course, a requirement to be part of the compact. But employers should, whether you have a nurse that's licensed in Georgia or if she says she's coming from a compact or any other state, you should always be looking a nurse that you're going to hire up in nurses.com. And we also have another database that's a part of it. It's called eNotify. And we ask employers, you can register your nurses into eNotify. It will give us information related to workforce. You can have a lot of workforce information for Georgia. It can tell you where nurses are coming from if you're a part of the compact. So the compact establishes an interstate commission. And we've had a lot of questions about this because people have said, "Whoa, what's this all about?" This is actually a group that exists now in the old compact. But that group is called the NLC Administrators. And this group consists of a representative, it's usually the executive officer of the Board of Nursing from all the states that are in the compact. And the purpose is to write the rules, make sure the compact is running smoothly, address issues if they come up, and hold one another accountable to adhering to all the law that's the compact. And they changed the name because the nurse was the Nurse Licensure Compact Administrators, and all other compacts call their administrative group Interstate Commission. So they decided, well, we might as well get with the program and be in alignment with the other compacts. So each state will have one representative. Initially, they will be responsible for writing rules and bylaws. If Georgia passes the legislation this coming year, you will have a seat at the table in writing the rules and bylaws. So the other change that comes with this is that the rules will be adopted directly by the Interstate Commission. So formerly, if the group, the administrators, decided they needed a new rule, every state had to adopt that rule. And as you can imagine, it was taking years. So they adopt rules such as soon as a nurse moves to another state and gets a new multi-state license, that old multi-state license has to be canceled. We don't want anyone with duplicate licenses. And so that was a rule that they wanted passed. And, you know, some states still haven't adopted it. So they felt as though this group needs the authority that when they think a rule is necessary for the compact to function safely, they need the ability to pass it. Now, it has a lot of procedural requirements. They need to give notice to the public, a 60-day notice. There's opportunity for public comment, opportunity for public hearing. They have to review the responses and then vote on the rules. So there's nothing that's going to be going on behind closed doors that nobody will know about. So how do you become a member? You must enact the Enhanced Nurse Licensure Compact model language into law. And that language is written and it cannot be changed because obviously all states that are part of the compact have to have the same language. Everything needs to be looked, viewed, and done the same way. So we are helping states have this legislation passed. We have a website, nursecompact.com. We have a lot of one-pagers for legislators and stakeholders. We have PowerPoint presentations. We're happy to provide testimony or help write testimony. And for some states that do have specific state issues, while the compact itself cannot be altered, sometimes we can write enabling language. For example, Missouri is a union state, and they put an enabling language that said nothing in this compact shall preclude a strike from occurring. So once you pass it, you have to implement it. Probably this is more technical aspects for the Board of Nursing, that they just have to make some changes to their database, change any rules in the nurse that are related to in the current regulations, change things like a licensure application, the board order and consent form. And what we feel is essential to this is notification needs to go out to every employer and nurse in that state, and we will be helping with that. So progress to date, as I mentioned, in 2016, 10 states enacted legislation. 18 states are introducing legislation in 2017. If all 18 pass, the compact will become effective the day the 26th state passes it. So let me give you a bit of a summary. The we call it the ENLC, Enhanced Nurse Licensure Compact, is based on 15 years of data that indicates the multi-state license is as safe as the single state license. It decreases financial burdens on nurses. It decreases financial burden on employers, and it enables all nurses to be equal candidates for jobs. And it replaces a 100-year-old licensure model with one that is safe and leads nursing into the future. Yeah, everybody always asks, what's the evidence? I think we have great evidence for this. The fact that the first states to join the new Enhanced Licensure Compact are the states who are already members in the Nurse Licensure Compact. So these states, if they had issues, they would have a great out right now. They wouldn't have to join the new Enhanced Compact. And the old one will just go away. But they're the first to join, and they don't want to be left behind. So they feel it has been a tremendous benefit to the nurses and their state. And so we feel that's great evidence that this is really the model for the future. So as I was looking through the different Georgia websites, I found this. I thought it was a great quote to end with from the Georgia Health News. They said, "It is a time for reflecting how we deliver our services and what the future of healthcare will look like." You know, this is something that, you know, boards of nursing are not often viewed by the public and stakeholders as advocates. But this is something that they are really able to do for the nurses in the state that protects the public, but also really offers them a lot of advantages. So if you want to find out a review of what I've told you, more information, you can go to nursecompact.com. And I want to thank you on behalf of everyone at NCSBN, and certainly thank the Georgia Board of Nursing for having me here today, and for all of you for being here. And do we have time for questions? Yes.
So if we will everyone have to reapply for licensure, or will it be an automatic licensure that's attached to every nurse's license?
Every nurse that wants, it depends on how the state does it. So they may make every nurse reapply, or some of the states are going to do it where existing licensees have the option. They can apply if they want, and then all new licensees will be automatically reviewed for a compact license.
We'll take the close one first.
I actually have two brief questions for you. You mentioned that when students have two licenses, the faculty also have to have that same licensure in both states. Who incurs the cost of that for the faculty?
For faculty?
Right.
I think it depends on the school.
Okay.
So, if the school pays for it, otherwise the faculty are supposed to.
Okay. Also, one of the issues that we've had recently has been a decrease in seeing what we call soft skills, caring, compassion, those types of things, making eye contact with patients. And have you considered that as an aspect of all of this technological?
Well, I think that's a point well taken. However, it's not our job to step in and say whether, the technology should be used or not. That's out of our realm. And I think it's something that schools should be addressing. And, but in terms of us, all our job is to say, we can facilitate that. And the thing is, while I completely agree with you that needs to be addressed more and more as some of this really takes hold, It offers such a tremendous benefit because it gets the healthcare services to remote areas of states that, really have a shortage of healthcare professionals.
Do we have a tentative date of when we will know if Georgia has become part of this compact?
Well, the first thing that has to be done is the legislation has to be introduced and passed by the state legislature. So, and you have kind of a small amount of time to do that in. You have a short session. So, if the bill is introduced in January, you should know by spring. But, it really takes all of you to do that because you really need to let your legislators know that this is important to you. There have been many states that we thought, my home state, Illinois, we thought last year this was a done deal. And, so much a done deal that nobody called their representative in the House, and they just never moved it out of committee. So you can't take it for granted.
How does it affect the state's budget? Is there the licensure fee goes to the state and then there's a separate fee that goes to y'all?
No, we don't get any money from it whatsoever. The licensure fees continue to go to the state. Our only stake in the game is because our job is to help the boards of nursing, but we get no money from it at all.
Perfect.
In fact, we give money towards it.
Hi, I'm Lisa Eichelberger. I've got several questions, and one I'll follow up with yours. If you have a license and it's for multiple states, what it's right now is $65 for our license. So what will our license fee be? I mean, is there an increase, and do we have to pay some to the other states?
You don't pay any money to any other state. That is up to the Board of Nursing and the state agency of what the licensure fee will be. States that have been part of the compact have not raised their fees because of it, but that is a state-specific question to answer. I can tell you this, that only one state that has joined the new compact, Oklahoma, is going to charge a little bit more for a multi-state license.
I'm concerned about how you're going to handle the workforce data piece that, a lot of states have come to rely on the relicensure process for collecting their workforce data. And I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to imagine how this would actually work and from a practical standpoint. And I know you've been addressing this or trying to address it, and I'm just trying to see what implications it has for the workforce forum. And, if I guess I just don't understand, if you're licensed in Georgia and we fill out the form and we're collecting our workforce data in Georgia, Georgia will have it. But if I'm licensed, then I can practice in Alabama. I'm not filling out a license in Alabama. Is Alabama, well, they're not participating right now, but let's say Florida. Is Florida going to get that data, or how's that going to work? So only Georgia would have it. So there will be some impact, because ordinarily if I needed to work in Alabama, I would get a license in Alabama and I would be counted in Alabama and I would fill out the workforce data in Alabama, right?
So
So how does that work? I mean, do you just get this multi-state license, right? And then that enables you to practice in any one of the states that is a member,
right,
without anything being given, although your name shows up, I guess, in the database, so that Florida and all these other states know that you're licensed there.
When they know you have a compact license. So, a remedy for that is e-notify, so that if every employer registered their nurses or had their nurses register and e-notify, we would have workforce data on every nurse in the country, and we could give Georgia all your data and say, here's where all your nurses are working. I mean, that's a possible solution.
Okay.
You know, I understand what you say, and we actually try and, you know, we partner with you,
Right.
and we collect data, and we do ask, what states are you working with?
Right.
So some of that, we try to capture it as best as possible. But you know what? Even with the single state model, we're not getting all of it.
You're right about that. Let's see. And it will have financial implications too. I'm just wondering,
For the state?
yeah, for the states.
And each state has to, it will, because they're going to lose some verification. But what it is that you lose some nurses that have a license but have a home state, but you also gain some because there are some nurses that live on the border that live in Georgia working in other states and will now need a Georgia license.
Yeah.
What states have told us, and we're going to study this much closer now with the new compact, so we have actual data, is some states have said it's a wash. Some states have said we've lost, you know, there has been some loss of revenue, but we've been able to, kind of like if you buy a new home, you know, a little bit more, you pay more money, but then you kind of adjust your budget accordingly. So we have not, in the 15 years in 25 states, had any state that deliberately raised licensure fees, cut back on services, or really it was to any detriment in those states. And like I say, they're all, you know, rejoining. So.
Mary Ann, could you talk a little bit more about the privilege versus the license and related to how that works and then related to discipline?
Sure. So if I get a license in my home state, if I am working in another compact state, I have a privilege to practice. If there's a complaint filed against me in the remote state, that state does the investigation and they make a determination on what they're going to do with my privilege to practice. They may say, this was human error, there's no problem. You know, Miss Nurse, or you could even say, take some CE courses and then you'll be fine in Georgia. Or you could say, this is a sex offender, this is very egregious. We don't care what the home state does, but I can tell you this, you're not coming back to Georgia ever. And you can revoke the privilege to practice for that nurse. So Georgia still remains very independent in the decisions they make about the nurses that are going to be practicing here.
Hi, I'm Karen Rawls from Grady Hospital. First of all, let me just thank you for being here and sharing this information. It was very enlightening. My question has to do with online. I heard during the presentation information about online faculty being required to have compact licensure.
Well, they're required to have a license right now in the state that they have students in.
Right, and so is the new rule going to require that the online faculty are part of compact states or not? Okay, so if the students are enrolled in other states, which we have quite a few students in Georgia that are enrolled in various different nursing programs across the country. And of course, they graduate and they get primarily their graduate nursing degrees from these organizations and from these schools that are online. I'm just curious about the impact or lack thereof of being either in or out of a compact state, how would that affect the faculty in terms of teaching? And also, because there is no effect on the students, they're still graduating, they're still able to work in the states that are not compact licensure. So is this decision going to have any impact on that either way?
A decision have an impact on students?
Students or faculty in terms of compact licensure across various different states in the country. Because right now you can go online and get a degree in nursing from Arizona.
Right.
And still work in Georgia with that degree.
Right.
And so I was trying to understand if this new process is going to have any effect on either the student or the faculty, because most of the time the faculty could live anywhere. They could live in Washington State teaching from a school in Arizona with a student that is graduating from that school living in Georgia.
Right. Well, it has no impact on students one way or another. Faculty, the only impact would be positive, that they would need fewer licenses, if they're.
And just to speak to that a little bit, we were discussing this earlier. We have a severe faculty shortage in Georgia, as well as nursing students. So we are not able to put out to meet the need. We all know that. So we are turning away students because faculty does not have a license in these other states. We have them applying from all over the country for programs. So as far as licensure, that BSN or associates or whatever from other online schools, that still goes through the same process that all of us have to do living here. So to get that initial licensure in Georgia or multi-state, you still have to meet all those guidelines. So we want that tuition from that student in Hawaii, in California and all that. So that's a positive revenue for the state with this process. So we're able to, recruit from out of the state for our tuition programs, our faculty, and our students. So I would say all those have a positive impact for the faculty.
In Georgia, we have a requirement for CEUs, but in having been licensed in other states, sometimes in different states, they have required educational programs that you have to take for that state. How are the CEUs and those required programs and everything handled in the compact?
That's a good question. So one of the things when we were looking at these uniform licensure requirements, and just ignore that would be my phone. I meant to turn it off before I came in. But we looked at that, and there was so much variation among the states. And to be honest, there was no evidence that one requirement was better than another requirement, and we couldn't require everything. And so we decided, you know what, we're going to leave it out of this. And certainly nurses that in Georgia, that's their home state, whatever your CE requirements are, they will have to abide by. But one of the solutions which I encourage is if there are certain things that you think are essential in terms of CE, that everybody, one of the things we know is of some help is a substance use course, then your hospitals should be requiring it, and that ensures that every nurse has it. But we could not reconcile that. No, only your home state.
I just want to clarify with this. So there's 15 states that have been in the compact forever, or
25.
25. But this new one is going to be if 26 states have to join the new enhanced, or it will become effective anyway in December of 18.
Right.
So that will be nationwide? Is that
Yes.
what we're talking?
Well, it will become effective for the states that are in it.
That are in it. Okay, okay, okay,
Right.
okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Erica. I'm actually the chair for the Metro Atlanta chapter of GNA, but I just really have a comment. I actually started out in Mississippi, which is a compact state, and that was my original license. And I really, like you said in your presentation, I looked at a lot of the other compact states first to just was going to move to, because when I started looking in Georgia, I couldn't even apply for the jobs without having a Georgia license. And of course, you know, that takes time and verification and things like that. So I just think about all of the nurses that we probably have lost because of the process. I know that when I wanted to, like, originally I wanted to go to Texas, and Texas is one of the compact states. So it would have been very easy for me to make that transition compared to, you know, one of the other states that were outside of the compact. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the way that you presented the information, and I hope that it really does pass, because I think that we all can benefit from it.
And you would be a great spokesperson for it.
So let me know if you need me to come with you on the road. But I was gonna say too, you know, since I've been a resident of Georgia over the last few years, when I went back to renew my license, now I only have a Mississippi license because I'm now a resident of Georgia. So I just have two license. I lost the compact. So I hope to get it back very soon.
This may be a silly question, but as far as faculty to student ratios in the clinical setting, what would happen if one state had their clinical to or faculty to student ratio as 1:8, and another faculty had another state had it at 1:10? Whose do they go by?
They go by whatever the law is in the state that they're in.
Okay, so the home state.
The home state
Okay.
laws prevent, no, where you working? Not the home state laws,
Oh, in the area of practice.
wherever you're practicing.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Marianne. That good? Appreciate you coming all the way down from Chicago for this.
Thank you very much.
At this time,
Good luck.
oh yeah, tell them that.
Good luck.
At this time, I'd like to introduce to you Wendy Clifton. Wendy is a political consultant and works with the Georgia Nurses Association, and she's going to give some information to you this afternoon on how you can advocate for the compact during the 2017 legislative session.
Forgot I had it on. It's okay. It wasn't even.
So while we're having a little dress change here, I will tell you that today's presentation is being videoed. Many of you asked about that ahead of time, and we kind of got that done at the last minute. So the presentation is being videoed and will be available afterwards. I'll communicate with you. Also, I know several of you have asked about the slides, and we will have all of that information available. The board will continue meeting today and tomorrow, so I'll work on that next week for you. Okay?
I think I'm good. Can you hear me? If you can't, just let me know. I can speak louder. I work with politicians every day, so I can very much speak plenty loud enough. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Wendy Clifton. I'm born and raised in deep South Georgia. I live in Atlanta now and have my own political consulting firm. Have worked for the Georgia Nurses Association now for, I think, about 8 years down at the state capitol. But let me just put my disclaimer out there on the front end. I am not a nurse. I am a lawyer. I'm very sorry. It helps me do what I do for you, though, so be grateful for that. I put that out there, though, because My job for GNA and for the nursing community in Georgia and on behalf of this piece of legislation is not to be the expert that you are and that you are, Board of Nursing. That is your job. My job is to help you understand the process. My job is to help you maneuver that process. My job is to help you manipulate that process when the time comes. And so what we're going to talk about today, and I was not aware of Mary Ann's incredibly informative and fantastic presentation. And so I included a couple things in my slide presentation that we will use in our discussion about advocacy and how you advocate. But really my goal today is to teach you how to do this, to teach you in a very simple way, in a non-threatening way, in a as a comfortable way as I can. How do you have a conversation with your local legislator from wherever you're from in the state? And then I'm going to really make this interactive. I am more than happy to have you ask and interrupt me with questions along the way. That might make Jim's life crazy, but I apologize for that on the front end if that's a problem. But truly, as I go through, because I'm going to cover a lot of information in a very short period of time, my goal today is to really help you be able to go back to your practice area, hospital, doctor's office, an online, tell you work for an insurance company, whatever it is that you do, so that you can go back to your hometown and then apply exactly what I'm going to talk to you about today. Okay? So how can you advocate to help us get the NLC passed? That's what I'm going to talk about. These different points that I'm going to just show you very quickly, the issue, the solution, an explanation of what the Nurse Licensure Compact is, are available on, and you referred to these one-pagers. And you're going to hear me in my talk throughout this to refer to one-pagers. And the reason I do that is because, let's be honest, legislators are about, like, does anybody in here have an 8-year-old? And don't get me wrong, they are 99% of them are there for all the right reasons. But there are 180 House members and 56 senators, and they do everything you can imagine in terms of profession and in terms of their lives back in their home district. We have a citizen legislature in Georgia. That means they only work part-time, and they get paid very part-time. And so they go back home and they're an insurance agent or a teacher. They might be a lawyer. They might be a doctor. We have about a half a dozen healthcare professionals that work in the legislature, but that's a half a dozen out of 236. Okay? And so their knowledge base of this subject matter and our issues is fairly limited. And so part of your job and part of what I'm going to help you learn how to do today is to educate them on those issues. But I say that about an 8-year-old because when the session starts, the 236 of them, all have lots of people like me, known as lobbyists, knocking on the door, asking for something. They respond better to you than they do to me, as they should. You vote for them. I only vote for one House member and one senator, just like you. And so having this conversation that I'm about to go over with you with them before January would really be helpful if you could do that. So that's my number one. If you can do that, let me ask a very simple question, but I'm not trying to intimidate everybody, truly. How many of you know the name of your House member and your Senate member? You can raise your hands if you want to. Like I said, I'm not trying to embarrass or intimidate, but I'm glad to see that number of hands. Now, when I say House member and Senate member, I don't mean you're a member of Congress, and I don't mean you're a U.S. Senator. Be clear, there are two levels. There's this thing called Congress that I do not work at by choice. Our state legislature is made up of state House and state senators, state representatives and state senators, 180 in the House, 56 in the Senate. If you know them by name already, fantastic. Next question. You know them by name. Do they know you by name? If they don't, that's okay. You got plenty of time before session starts. You got about 60 days. Okay, 57, 53. General Assembly begins Monday, January the 9th. It's the first day of session. But nothing happens like the first 3 weeks. So you pretty much got till the end of January, I'm just saying. Except for the fact that they're in Atlanta, and unless you live in Atlanta, it makes it a little harder to get in touch with them or see them. But that 236 people needs you to help them understand why this is important. They need you to explain to them much of what Mary Ann has explained to you today, but in a lot shorter, more succinct way, because they're an 8-year-old. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that in a way of competing interests. There are all these knocks on the door, everybody wanting something. So what I'm going to walk you through now is how do we get that message across. This first slide, issue, solution, benefits, and proven safe and efficient are all in one of the NLC one-pagers. One-pagers are going to become very important. You'll see why in just a minute. So what we're going to talk about is how do you prepare? How do you do this? Okay? So the first step in anything, right? In anything is understanding the process. That's the first step. So this is the process. I didn't put this up here to scare you, even though it should. But this is what it means to pass a law. This is what it means to pass a law in any General Assembly in the country and in Congress for the most part. It is intended to give you a schematic, if you will. I just realized I never put this up on the screen like that. So let's go through this real quick so you can see it better. Yeah, I'm not that IT expert, can you tell? This is intended to give you an idea of what the process is, so that when we at GNA send out our action alert to the nursing community and it says House Bill 100, that's not the number, that's just imaginary. I just made that up, so don't write that down thinking that that's the bill number, okay? House Bill X, House Bill 100 is being heard today in the House Health and Human Services Committee. And I need your tomorrow, let's make it tomorrow. And we're asking you to contact these 36 legislators, House members that sit on the House Health and Human Services Committee. For all you know, if you don't know this, one of them might be your legislator. But even if they're not, doesn't hurt to contact them to say, please vote yes for House Bill 100. That'll be in our action alert. It will tell you what to do. You just need to follow it. But I'm telling you this because this process, understanding it, you don't have to know it. That's my job. I'm telling you this because it's like your job as a nurse is, you know, how do you give somebody a shot or draw blood? There is a process that you go through to do that. I don't know what it is because I hate needles. So I don't need to know that. But for you, that's an important process to know as a nurse, right? You know it like the back of your hand. I know this like the back of my hand. I don't want you to know it. I want you to understand it, the process. Not literally understand every step along the way, but to understand that when we send out a message indicating, or through the board, they send out a message saying this is what's about to happen, please engage. That's what we need you to do. And so understanding this very basic process that a bill goes, it gets introduced, it's sent to a committee. Number 5, it's where the committee consideration happens. That's where we want it to come out of the House Health and Human Services Committee. It then gets sent to the full House for a full vote by the 180 House members. Then that's the floor debate, number 8 down here at the bottom. And it has the same options as it did under the committee. Do pass as amended, or do not pass. We need it to be A, do pass. But then, after you do 8, it goes all the way back to the top and starts again in the Senate. So you don't ever get a bill passed, for the most part, in the United States without it doing the process 2 different times. Okay? That process is meant to make sure issues are vetted properly. Does anybody remember this? I don't know if is there an internet connection? I'm old enough to remember that, right? I don't know if it'll let me do it, but I'm gonna try. So when I was a kid in the 70s growing up, there were 3 TV channels. I'm from Deep South Georgia, and there were 3 TV channels. There was no such thing as cable, right? What's a satellite? Are you kidding me? Statesboro. We had 3 TV channels, and this was what I lived for on Saturday mornings.
Yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting. Lost today, and I hope and pray that today I am still just a bill.
When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. So folks back home decided they wanted a law, so they called a local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. So at the ripe old age of, I think, around 8 or 6 or 7 or 8, something like that, I became addicted to that, and now I do that for a living. Ironically enough, that's the process. And I show you that video because, one, if you didn't see it, which, you know, unfortunately, the, what is it called? The millennial generation has never seen that video before because we don't show cool things like that on Saturday morning television. Instead, they watch people kill each other. So just a bizarre phenomenon. But that is the process. And I showed that to you, one, because I think it's a phenomenally simplistic way of looking at how the law is made. But for many, many people like myself, it is very much a part of my childhood memories on Saturday mornings. So the second step is gathering relevant information. And again, I'm going to cover a lot of information here, but I'm not going to get into a lot of weeds about it because we're going to tell you a lot of this stuff when you get your legislative alert when the session is in. But all of these things matter. You know, where does your legislator, what committee do they sit on? Always an important question to be answered. And when you meet or get to know your legislator, ask them that. What committees do you sit on? Because if they sit on Health and Human Services, Human Relations and Aging, if they're on the Appropriations Committee, there are a lot of things around healthcare that a number of legislators are involved in that could be beneficial to you knowing them and having a relationship. What's the bill number? I gave you the example of House Bill 100. It might be House Bill 50. I don't know at this point, but that's the information that we're going to give you. Where is that bill being sent? The committee is important. Where is if you decide you wanted to come to a hearing at the Capitol, and we'll tell you about those. Where is that going to take place? Most committee meetings do not take place in the state capitol itself. They take place in a building across the street called the Coverdale Legislative Office Building. Knowing that information makes your ability to engage in this process easier. And the good news is all this information today, well, it's not working. There we go, is available on the internet, all of it. And so, for example, let's say we give you the bill number and you're not sure if your House member or Senate member is on the committee that the bill gets sent to. You can go and click on committees on the House side or committee on the Senate side, and then pull up the committee that the bill's been sent to and look and see if, in fact, your legislator sits on that committee. And so beyond our very simplistic instructions to you, you can do a lot of your own research on the internet today. So next step, this is, like I said, not complicated stuff. It's pretty simple if you just peel back those layers of the onion and figure out what this looks like. You want to prepare your conversation with that legislator. When I mentioned a while ago about them being from all different professions and you having 60 days or more to meet with them before session really gets underway, I'm very serious about that, even if you don't know them. They are, I'll tell you a great story that one of my dear legislative friends told me 20 years ago when I was very young in this business. She's a lawyer, a long-standing legislator, served in both the House and the Senate. She's run for statewide office before. But she said to me 20 years ago, Wendy, if a constituent calls me or talks to me more than 3 times, I know who they are and what they're calling for every time. And I said, why is that? She said, because that's how few constituents ever call me. 3 times. Think about it. 3 times. So you pick up the phone, maybe even before Thanksgiving, even though that's a short window, but just say the week after Thanksgiving. Can I come see you in your law office, in your classroom at the school, or in your insurance agent's office, or whatever business that they happen to do there in the district? Can I come visit with you? I'd like to talk to you about a very specific piece of legislation. They're not going to tell you no. Why? Because you vote for them. Because they're afraid of you. No, because they really do want to hear what you have to say. Because you are the expert. They are not. And they want to understand and learn what's coming before them come January. And so meeting with them is really, really an important piece of this. And again, I give you all these steps, not to in any way intimidate, but instead to help you plan and prepare. But you treat this just like any other, meeting on behalf of your child at the school to talk to the principal or the teacher. This is like you going to meet with your pastor at church about, a problem or whatever your advocacy is. You go through these processes, you don't think about it. But number one, you want to make an appointment, whether it's at the Capitol or in the district. Why? Because they're busy people. And if you just think showing up at the Capitol one day is going to work for you, try it. I promise you it's very likely it won't be successful. Not because they don't want to meet with you, but because they're really busy when they're down there. They're only there from January till roughly the end of March. We do a lot of crazy stuff in that time period. And so if you don't have an appointment on their calendar, it's more likely than not that you might see them. You might get to shake their hand and introduce yourself to them, but you very well may not have a meaningful conversation. So get on their calendar. Not that hard to do. When you meet with them, be brief and concise. What do I mean by that? Let me tell you something. One of the things that makes me craziest as a lobbyist is when I walk into a meeting with a fellow lobbyist or even a client, and they want to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to get to what we're here for. Because their time's valuable. But some people don't get that. And so you have to cut to the chase. Representative Smith, I'm here to talk to you about House Bill 100. It's called the Nurse Licensure Compact, and here's what it does. Talk about it for a few minutes. He or she may have some questions for you, but you don't need to get way down in the weeds. All these questions that y'all just asked and answered of Marianne, your nurses, you care about that stuff? They don't. They do not want to hear all down in the weeds about how that, some may, some could. But most of them, especially your farmer from South Georgia, I promise you they're not going to ask you that question. And it's not because they don't care, it's because they trust you. By definition of what you do for a living, by the fact that you took the time out of your schedule to come and visit with them, and the fact that you vote and are a constituent, you get a certain amount of deference just by giving that effort. And so helping them understand why it's important, the basic premises, the issue and the solution and the benefits that I put up there that's on this one pager. That's really what you got to cover. Be brief and concise. What's your purpose? Representative Smith, I want to ask for your support of this bill. Boom, straight up. You don't hem and haw. Well, I'm just really wanting to know, how you feel about nursing. I'm sorry, seriously? No, not the answer, not the right question. The question is, will you support this bill? That's the question. And so once you say that, give them an example. And the examples you used in your opening presentation of people practicing, not even knowing that they needed to have a license, but give the example. And I've been talking to a number of legislators, obviously, in preparation for this bill for the 17th session. And one of the conversations that's a very prevailing, two pieces that are very prevailing in this conversation. Number one, the lack of access to care in rural Georgia. Number one, that's number one. Number two, we have a study committee that's been going on this year on military affairs. Large population affected by this piece of legislation. Why? Because a lot of spouses of military men and women come to Georgia because of the numerous military bases we have here, and they take a year or longer to get their license. Back to your point about not being able to apply for a job until you actually have your license. Same thing applies. They knew they were going to be shipped to Georgia for their transfer or whatever, but they couldn't do anything about it until they got here, actually applied for the license, and then got it. That could potentially be 6 months to a year or longer out of the workforce waiting for that process to all go through. Those two issues are enough to make most legislators go, okay, I'm with you. What next? Oh, hey, how's your mom and them? I am clearly from South Georgia, am I not? But talking about your community, a nurse you may know, maybe it's you, but talking about your healthcare facility and why this bill is important, that's what brings it home to them. They want to hear why it matters to you, not to me, not to your health system employer, not to your doctor, to you, that nurse sitting in front of them. Number 6, I have to put this on there about not bluffing, because people in this business think that if they just make something up, then they're not going to get caught. And that it could not be farther from the truth. What do I mean by that? I'll use the example of how many states have passed this, okay? Because you have the original compact of 25 states that passed it, and now you've got the enhanced version that 10 have passed, you could really make this way better than it is and say 35 states have passed it, which ain't true. And so I'm not using that as an example to say anything more than just if you don't know the answer to the question, say, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Because guess what? That gives you another chance to then talk to them later, and that could be your third point of contact. Boom, you're the expert now in nursing because they've never heard from a nurse before. So just make sure you know what you're talking about before you give them an answer. Leave evidence of your visit. That is what this is for. And we'll probably do a Georgia specific one that, looks like it came from us. No offense. She's good. She's all right. Trust me. That's right. But the reason I say that, one piece of paper too, do not hand them a notebook or 4 or 5 pieces of paper front and back. Nope, wrong answer. They will not read it. And it's more likely that if you just give them this one, then the rest of it's going to go in the trash. Anyway, again, 8 years old. Pictures matter. Pictures. Wait, where is it? There's one that's got a big picture on it. Oh, I guess I don't have that one. But that stuff matters because they don't have a lot of time and attention to all the details that they're asked to make major decisions on in the 40 legislative days we're in session. And so help them help you by giving them something that they can go back. Oh, I remember that nurse. She came and I don't remember what we talked about, but I know I've got something here on my desk. And sure enough, they'll find it. The other piece to add to that is put your business card on here or your name. Just write your name and your cell phone number for the exact same reason. Leave something behind every single time. And last but not least, please, 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 please thank them for what they do. Even if you ask them for their support of the bill and they say no. And the reason for that is because they make $17,000 a year. They sacrifice their families and their businesses to be public servants for you and for me. And they may have whatever reason on the planet to vote no. And trust me, you will hear all kinds of reasons. But it's okay. But they still deserve your appreciation. So thank them. Last but not least, follow-up communication plan. So because I do this year-round, I believe very strongly that this process is a year-round process. And what I mean by that is we're in session from January to roughly the end of March, early April. And then they all go back home and they work and run their campaigns when it's election year like this year. But they go back home and they go back to their regular everyday lives. And they really, most of them really don't do a lot of legislative other than constituent services in that off season. I go, to them in the districts regularly and see them, and most of my colleagues do that. But for them, being in the districts, they live there, they're from there, it's their home. It's where their kids go to school and their families go to church, and they play softball and all the things that you do when you live somewhere. They want to see you in the community as well, to thank them for the bill that they potentially voted yes for, to encourage them to keep running if you agree with that, or not, if not. But to be that connection back to nursing in their community. And so I don't treat this work any differently, and don't think you should as a voter than I do, even though I do it as a job. You have 2 legislators. That's it. It's not like you have to manage 236 like I do, so make it a lot easier for you. But truly, get to know them, reach out to them, invite, if you happen to have, if you work at a public health department or a hospital or a FQHC or just a doctor's office, invite them to an event and help them learn about healthcare in your community. Because in my opinion, in all the lobbying work that I do, and I do a lot of it, healthcare is probably the most complicated, difficult, costly subject matter, second only to education in the Georgia General Assembly. And for them to learn what we want them to learn, they have to get out in the community and hear from you. Not from me, from you. And so I just encourage you to do these things and really use the things that God has given you to be a good advocate. Use your skill set as a nurse to help educate them about what they don't know around public policy for nursing. And these are just some tips that I really encourage. Compromise, and I say this one out specifically because you never know on a piece of legislation like this one. Should be fairly non-controversial, but to your point, in Illinois, you thought it was a done deal, but everybody thought it was a done deal, and therefore it never came out of committee. That can happen. But there's also this issue of compromise. And so what happens if you end up with, one piece of language in the compact that's a problem for a handful of legislators? Well, you have to work through that. And that's the job that we at GNA and the lobbying team will have in helping figure those compromises out. But so much of this job is just around doing something. And so I encourage you to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and pleasure always to be here. Thank you.
We've got just a few minutes. If anybody has any questions for Wendy.
Good, that means I answered them all.
Oh, wait.
Yes, ma'am, sorry. Okay.
Is that Georgia is about to become the number 4 state with the greatest nursing shortage in the United States.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen in the next 7 years. If we don't do something to increase the number of nurses in Georgia, we're going to be sitting at 40 to 50,000 short.
Okay, great point. So her point, for those of you who couldn't hear until she got the microphone, was she hadn't heard any of us talk about the fact that the nursing shortage is also a significant concern and a reason to support the compact. And I think you're absolutely right. What I would say to you is I didn't comment on it because I didn't want to bluff and throw up numbers that I didn't know. But you're absolutely right. I know that we are in serious nursing shortage mode, but to be number 4 in the next 7 or 8 years, I was not aware of that. So I will add that to my data repertoire so I have it going forward. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I want it. Absolutely. But I think that is, if you think about what are our 3 arguments, it is rural access to care in rural Georgia, the military bases and military families, and the nursing shortage. Absolutely. I think those are your 3. Thank you.
Hi, Wendy. I want to thank you for being here today. And you're
you.
a very eloquent speaker.
Thank you.
My name's Trevi. Hi, I'm from Georgia Piedmont College, and I also work at Piedmont Medical Center in the emergency room, so I can speak to the nursing shortage firsthand. But I was wondering, as an instructor, would it be a good idea to have our students kind of sign their support for the bill when we meet with the representatives, so we can attach it to the letter?
Absolutely.
So we have more people
Yes.
behind it.
Yes,
What kind of
yes, and
information
yes.
would need to be on that?
Generally, when I do advocacy talks, what I encourage you to do is when you call a legislator or write in a legislator or email a legislator, that you always include your name and your address, where you're registered to voting address, not like if you work at the hospital, but you might live in a different county. So you want where you're registered to vote address, because of the volume of constituent emails that some offices get. If you're not a constituent, they won't respond to you just because they can't deal with the volume. And so that's the most important information, in my opinion. You can certainly put email addresses and phone numbers in there too, but that's going to be most important for most legislators. And depending on their mode of response, all of that information would be helpful. But yes, as much student involvement as you can get, there's no downside. What I would encourage though is try not to, and I say this completely with respect to email, but encourage your students not to send thousands of emails to one legislator, because it only makes the legislators mad. When their email box cannot even take any other emails except ones for nursing, it gets to a point where they get a little frustrated. And usually it's not an issue like this, but I'm just saying sometimes students can get a little bit overly aggressive about email. And so you want them to communicate it, but they don't need to send, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails. So, but yes, great question. Others? Is anybody else cold in here, or is it just me? Holy cow, I've been freezing the whole time I'm up here. Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure I was in good company.
So, Wendy, this may not be a question for you, and it may be, I don't know for sure. How are we getting to nurses who are not part of GNA?
I think that's a great question. I know that there is a communication mechanism that the board has that we are involved in, but I don't really think I'm qualified to answer that question. Did you
But
hear
I
what
don't
she
know
said?
if the board is communicating with, I've heard nothing from the board about this, so I'm wondering.
No, I didn't mean about this particular. I just meant during the session. I know that you guys have sent out emails in the past about certain bills, and that was really what I was referring to. Does one of you guys want to?
Was that an agreement? I didn't hear
Yes,
Lisa.
yes,
I
it
don't know
was.
where she is. Okay. And then my other question, and this is for you, are there other compacts that are going to be introduced? Because I know the physicians have been looking at that nationally, and I know they're beginning to look at it from a state perspective, similar to the way we are.
So I too have heard of physicians. I don't think that the MAG in Georgia is ready for that yet, from what I've heard. But I would say that I have heard that there is another, the Physical Therapists Association is potentially looking at a compact, and you know, we'll be doing something similar. But it's apparently brand new for them. There's only like 1 or 2 states that have even passed it, and so you know, it'll be a different conversation for them as well, because they don't have those 3 powerful talking points that we just referred to: the nursing shortage, the military family issue, and healthcare, access to healthcare in rural Georgia, are all kind of a trifecta that I think is going to have a different impact than it would on any other compact.
Other nurses, how do we communicate?
So the question was, how do they communicate with other nurses?
So I represent the Georgia Association of Occupational Health Nurses.
Okay.
We're one of those kinds of nurses who've had multiple licenses
Yes.
for all of our careers.
Right.
And this is incredibly important to us. We've been working on it for years.
Sure.
And so we want to be involved.
Yeah.
In this, and we will get our nurses involved. But there's other nursing associations that I've been aware of.
Sure, sure. I would be remiss, and my boss would liable to fire me if I didn't say this. I would encourage everyone to be sure you join the Georgia Nurses Association. Then they'll get all the information that they need. Yes, sir.
So I serve on the board for the GONL, and the GONL is very interested in this topic. In fact, our last conference, this was a very hot topic. Oh, do I really need that? So this is a very hot topic for us, and we're looking. What's that? Oh, Georgia Organization of Nurse Leaders. And this has been a hot topic for us. This is something we want to partner with other organizations to help make happen, because as you know, Georgia is a bit behind in healthcare, especially for nurses. My question is this, though: what makes this year the year to bring this forward? Why do we feel that the political atmosphere is ready to take on such a battle?
It shouldn't be such a battle, and it's that trifecta that I just explained. I mean, we've been having this conversation in Georgia for more than 5 years. So I mean, this is not a new conversation. And again, in my time at GNA, there were several years ago, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 years ago, where the compact was being considered, and there were questions. And so this is the pre-enhanced version, but there were concerns from our Attorney General's office about the constitutionality of some pieces of the original compact. Now that we're looking at a different version, we apparently don't have that issue. And so I think it's, number one, we've been considering it for a long time, but number two, you now have these 3 issues of a shortage and the military bases and just lack of access to care that are driving a conversation that I've got legislators asking me about it. And so it begins to take on a life of its own. And so at some point you can't, walk away from that. You have to jump on it when you can. But great question. Yes. Sure. Good, thank you. Any others?
As far as communication with the other associations, at one time we had nursing practice
practice or something like that, which had, I know the few meetings I attended, there was over 25 organizations from the state meeting together to share and disseminate this information. They started it up again, I want to say maybe September, October last year.
Okay.
I wasn't able to attend, so.
Is it called the same thing?
I don't recall that. But it's something to look for because your associations are attending it and they're the ones to bring this information back.
Okay, great. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I know Marcus had to leave, but GNA is sort of the head lead on that. And what we've been trying to do is to get the president or designee, the chairperson or president of that organization to take information and they would get the information from GNA and then send it out to their membership so that we could do something like a grassroots liaison type of thing for advocacy. My question was about, do we have any idea or anticipate who will be our supporters and who might have objections to this?
Because I've got the draft bill from Legislative Council, and we are beginning to shop it for signatures. We'll be doing that over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Again, the Rural Caucus is my number one focus for the reasons that we've discussed. And I, again, have gotten zero pushback. I think that there's always going to be discussion from the Tea Party type, less government type of folks, which is more prevalent in the House today than in the Senate, that will ask questions about why do we want to align ourselves with all these other states. But the practical reality is that group only has about anywhere from 20 to 40 members, and I don't need but 91 votes in the House. And so, you can always aim for 180 votes and 56 votes, but I don't need but 91 and 29. So there's going to be opposition, I'm sure, to some extent on things like that, and maybe some other things that I'm unaware of at this point. But I don't anticipate it being anything that we won't be able to overcome.
Okay. I have a representative that's coming to Clayton. I'm at Clayton State,
Yes,
and she's coming Monday. And so I wanted to talk with her about this.
Sure.
And so I know she's going to ask, do you have a sponsor yet? Who is it? And all of that. And so I was trying to anticipate some of those questions.
Yeah, I think the best answer right now is it's going to be a tremendous rural push.
Okay. Thank you.
Doesn't mean that urban legislators can't sign the bill. Let me be clear. That's not my intent. But the reason I do say that is because I think it does the access to care issue is one that is frequently discussed in the legislature in the last 3 to 5 years, and one that carries a significant amount of weight. So we'll be looking for signers, bipartisan, Democrat, Republican, rural, urban, black, white, male, female. I'm going to be looking for anybody that's breathing. I'm just kidding. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I noticed California on that map was not part of this, and I understand why they're very strong. But in trying to gather strength, are there any other non-nursing stakeholders that would really benefit from this that we could address, partner with?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is emphatically yes. And I've already had some of those conversations, and there's a colleague of mine in the room actually who represents the nursing home industry for that very reason. I think there's going to be a lot of organizations that want to get on board with this. Have had some conversations with insurance companies for the exact same reason. I liked that IT map of the health IT companies in Georgia. Never seen that before. I think those are all potential allies. I think there is a great opportunity for a coalition, if you will, that's not just nurses for sure. And the conversations that I've had with folks up to this point certainly lead me to believe that it will be a wide variety of what that coalition looks like. So yes, absolutely. Great point. Other questions? Yes. Right. Yeah, it's driving it. Good. Thank you. Any others? Oh, one in the far back.
Hi, Angel Wilder, representing Herzing University, Atlanta. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful information that you provided today.
Sure.
Now, I'm the nursing clinical coordinator at Herzing University. I'm not a nurse. Okay, I want to make that known. However, I do have a meeting scheduled with Senator Hunter Hill in December.
Great.
So my question here is, would it be operative for me to advocate or maybe
Yes.
drop?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, sure.
No equivocation. Yes.
Okay.
And what I said earlier, you know, I won't have a bill number probably by early December. And so just call it what it is, the Nurse Licensure Compact.
Sure.
I know Senator Hill well. Tell him Wendy will talk to him about it.
Sure.
But yeah, just exactly what I've walked you through today would be the conversation you would have with him. And, you know, ask him if he'd be willing to sign the bill. I mean,
Most
I have
definitely.
no hesitation for you asking things like that and then referring them back to GNA just because, you know, we'll be the ones kind of managing all that process and how that works. But yes, please do. And for anybody else in the room, rock on.
Sure.
That's right. Yeah, he is a vet. Yeah. Oh, great point. Thank you, Russell. He is by definition going to like your bill because he himself is a vet. He's a veteran. And is very, very proud of that and has run on it in in all of his elections. And so that's your best argument with him. Not that you're going to need it. Any others? Thank y'all so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Wendy. We appreciate GNA's help on this. At this time, we'll take about a 15-minute break, and then the board will proceed with its afternoon session. So board members are over here if anybody's looking for them, and thank you for coming this afternoon.